started.
I have pressed the button, and that
Excellent.
is the big topic right now is the Dragonflight Alpha, um, coming out, I think it was this Thursday, I wanna say?
Yep,
Uh,
14th. That I think you actually predicted it on the show, by the way, based off rumors or whatever. But good
let's
job.
go. Let's go, old me that doesn't remember that entirely, but I trust you.
Excellent.
Um, and it was to a slightly larger group than was expected, right? There were a lot of content creators that got it. A lot of the top end guilds have a lot of players in the Dragonflight Alpha, but I think there were a lot of just random individuals as well. As you could see on a few streams, people that were messing with said streamers, right?
I didn't actually see much of people messing with people, but yeah, I think this was a pretty large like first wave kind of. I mean, they had like a pretty small number that did like the 2 day advanced like NDA portion,
Right,
um
right.
but yeah, as far as like a first wave or whatever, yeah, this was probably bigger than has been in the past. I don't know. I don't have a great memory for that.
Um, what I will say is though there was a post recently on Wowhead that talked about how, or it was from an interview I think where Ian was stating the fact that they feel a lot further along and they have a lot to show. Like
Hmm.
their example was that it took 3 months from the first alpha to make one of the zones playable in the past, like for
Okay.
whatever expansion it was. And
Yep.
then now their schedule is to kind of release like a zone each week. So it sounds like they're ahead of the game, and they said that once they have released all that content, which I don't know, that might be about 6 weeks is my guess, a month and a half, that it will
Okay.
move into beta. Who knows?
Hmm.
That's closer to an open beta, closer towards the time that you and I get to play an evoker. So,
Well, hopefully before that. But
yeah.
yeah, I think after seeing like Ian in interviews and stuff like that, I think I'm generally coming around to the idea that it's going to be ready for 2022. And like that's surprising because I was pretty in the camp of like not believing that was anywhere close to like a reasonable possibility, but I don't know.
Uh,
They've they're slowly convincing me.
yeah, they're doing a pretty good job at it too, because there's not too much that they need to work on to make this expansion work, right? Like you think about Shadowlands, and there were so many things that they had to balance, right? You had your covenants, you had your individual classes, the soul binds, the every little aspect to it, right?
Legendary powers, yep.
Legendary powers, the fact that they were then going to do double legendaries, like all those little things. Double legendaries, obviously, far down the path, and even
Right.
to that point, they still weren't very well balanced. But the point being that I think that now when you look at it, they've got what, in terms of player power, talent trees to really look at, and then just individual tuning. I feel like they have made this a much easier process for themselves and much more enjoyable for the player base.
I think they have said that they are going to do tier set bonuses. Um, so that's also one thing. But I mean, like, I think they've shown in the past and stuff that they do a pretty good job of balancing tier set bonuses if they need to, and they can change the numbers on them and stuff. Where, like, they try and fit everybody like between maybe like 8% to 12% of a DPS increase or throughput increase or whatever based on the tier set bonus. I mean, like, there's always going to be some outliers probably on both ends, but like they do a pretty good job. So I'm not too worried about tier sets like radically like making this an impossible task for them either.
Yeah.
Um, the one thing that, and maybe this is just me being like paranoid of problems, but is I feel like with the way talents are working, is that I'm kind of concerned because to me in my head this is a separate topic. We don't have to go into this too much if I'm going completely off the tangent, but um is like there's almost like I would say five maybe like versions of your spec that could exist, and it's like one is like the super AoE like sustained AoE like mythic boss build, and on the other end of the extreme is like the single target focused raid patchwork like, but then you have like different versions in the middle of like okay, it's mostly single target, but like slight cleave, or like it's mostly AoE, but like it's tyrannical weak, and so I still want to have like some single target for the boss. And then there's like a medium in the middle of like the most efficient single target and AoE like talents and stuff. And I'm kind of like concerned that the gap between the single target only and like the full AoE might be too big. Whereas in Shadowlands, like for Hunter, for example, it's like if I take full AoE Mythic Plus talents and like soulbinds and stuff like that, I still do like probably 90%, maybe maybe 80% at worst of my like single target DPS. Whereas I'm looking at some of the talent trees that have been released so far, and obviously they're like subject to change. They're like the first iteration. They've already announced changes and stuff like that. But there's some where you can take like full AoE talents and like you don't have anything for single target. And it's like, am I going to be doing like 40% of my single target DPS or like 60% or something? And so I'm wondering if that's something that might be the tricky to balance thing is like, and especially between classes too, because then you're getting in weird situations of like in a raid comp where like certain classes are able to take their AoE on a boss because they don't lose as much single target, whereas another class like loses all of their single target and so they aren't able to AoE, and like it gets into a weird metagame like thing where you're balancing the efficiency of like every class and specs talent tree efficiency for different like target counts and stuff at the same time collectively rather than like on an individual basis, and it gets into like this huge complicated math problem. So that's like the one thing where I'm like I'm seeing this as a potential problem on the horizon, and it's like the the storm clouds are in the distance and I'm like maybe it'll just rain and maybe it won't, it'll clear up, but maybe it's like the incoming thunderstorm that's like slowly creeping towards us that I'm foreseeing in the future.
Yeah, and I don't know. I obviously can't answer that myself. We'll have to see it. I feel like they have a good chance to somewhat address that in the tier sets and how those work as well. Like we'll kind of have to see that. I
That's
almost
true.
I
That
I
could be a good solution to that.
I do feel like this early into alpha and just looking at those trees, I don't feel like is enough to judge it. I feel like the
It's
moment
probably
though,
too soon to be making chicken little the sky is falling
that's
like
funny.
apocalypse predictions, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's fair.
but if we see the Warcraft logs, kind of standings in like the higher percentile, and you see a larger discrepancy than Shadowlands, that's gonna piss off the player base pretty significantly, I would say. So I would say that it's still probably um, in the distance, but that there's enough time, in my opinion, to at least address it in some manner, right? Certainly hope so,
Hopefully.
but
I think they can probably balance it if needed. It just seems it's going to be trickier when it's not like you're just like I always have multi shot and I always have arcane shot or whatever. It's like in these talent trees, it's like if I'm taking multi shot talents and stuff like that, it's like I literally don't have the buttons to do single target. Like I might not have rapid fire. I might not have. I mean, you have kill shot, but like you might not have chimera shot or whatever. Like you might not have literally the buttons that do single target damage. So it's like you can't just like buff them and make them do enough damage. Like if the talents are weaker, because like you actually just don't have the button to press to like make it strong enough. So that seems like a weird tricky thing to do. But
yeah.
hopefully they figure it out. They've definitely been able to balance that pretty well in the past. Like obviously there's exceptions. Survival Hunter, Industrial Lock are getting nerfed, but usually they do a pretty good job. So like I don't know, they must have something, I'm sure, in place as a plan to figure it out if needed. Because they always like to give themselves levers to like mess with stuff if they need to tweak stuff as like emergencies. But I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to see, but they are already iterating on the current talent trees, which is just great to see. Like we're hearing concepts about how the DK tree might be changing slightly, right?
Mm-hmm.
A couple other trees that are getting looked at, and it's kind of seeming like they are taking the community feedback this early on. Maybe not every point's being addressed, but a significant portion of them for sure, it seems.
Yeah, Hunter's already gotten, I think, 2 blue posts at least about the issues with archers, which I was certainly critical of, and it seems like they are aware and receptive to the feedback of the problems already, and so I am like more than pleased with the communication so far. I hope it continues, and I hope it sets a new standard going forward because it is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, these Max group interviews are proving to be incredibly useful
Yes,
for
super
the
good.
community. Um, and what's even better is that the people that he's got on there are talking intelligently about this spec. It's not like they're taking somebody that has the wrong opinions up there necessarily. Like you might not agree with 100% of the things that are being said. I know I think you did for the hunter scenario, but that, like a majority of the problems are being announced, which is just great to see.
Well, yeah, and like a lot of the stuff I feel like isn't even really opinion based, where it's like, a certain thing of the spec could be fun or not fun, and it's kind of like a subjective, opinion type thing. But a lot of the stuff in the trees that are being brought up is like, I have to take this thing that only buffs my single target to get the AoE talent, or like my class only has Starfall to press an AoE and then literally can't spend Astral Power because Starfall has a cooldown. And it's like I just cap Astral Power, and that feels bad. And so it's like, yeah, I guess feeling bad is kind of more of an opinion, but like it is also just a fact of the spec that like, yeah, that is how the spec works, that you press your AoE button and then you don't have any way to spend resources to do any more AoE past that. And that it's not that it feels bad, it's like it feels like wrong that like no other spec in the game works that way, and it feels like it's not intended to work that way, and so it seems like kind of fundamentally broken. And so I think that's kind of the more important stuff that they're bringing up, is like not just that these are opinions that this is fun, this isn't fun, but like this is not designed functioning properly, kind of in like a way that makes sense. And that's the more important stuff, which they've been very good at pointing that out, I think. And removing their own like personal biases like of what is fun and stuff away from that too, because yeah.
Yeah, and I almost want to hold my tongue on this next one, but talking about the Shadow Priest talent where you shield yourself and you do more damage. I can bring that up in a second here. Let me just swap over. Yeah, it's this in the Shadow tree specifically. Down towards the bottom left is Sanguine Teachings. While shielded, Vampiric Touch and Devouring Plague deal 5% additional damage with 3 potential points to go into that talent. Like, I say hold my tongue because they're going through all the trees and announcing
Right.
these things that they're going to change, and we haven't seen the post yet about Shadow Priest, but it could easily come out while we're doing this, that type of
Right.
thing.
Yep.
But that's one where I feel like that definitely needs to be adjusted. I feel like you obviously agree. Right?
I hate the design of this talent. Like so viscerally, because the way that you want, like, okay, there's shields and healing and stuff like that, and like healing is kind of like a passive thing that there's a limit on the amount you can get healed, but shields also kind of have a limit, which is the duration of the shield. And like you don't want the shield to expire before having taken enough damage to like consume the shield. That's kind of like overhealing on the shield. Like it's effectively wasted because you pressed it or used it on somebody and there wasn't enough damage to break it, so that you wasted out on the like potential value of the shield compared to using it sometime else. And so this talent like makes you want to press your shield buttons when you're taking the least damage so that you have the damage buff for the longest period of time. But that's so counterproductive to how shields work. And it's like so opposite and like contradictory and counterintuitive, and it's just so bad. And I hate it, and I don't want it to ever exist. I understand the concept behind it, where like priests are the shielding class, and then Shadow Priest is the buff damage dealing spec, and so we can make these synergize together. Like I understand the concept, but it's so fundamentally backwards that it's like it would be terrible.
Yeah, like throwing, even just throwing Power Word Shield into their rotation in some sort, make that reasonable is just weird altogether,
like
right? Like,
like imagine if you're in like the Sylvanas P1 intermission or something where it's just Rives going. But imagine she could take damage. And the optimal thing in that phase would be for you to like spirit shell yourself. Like it's so nonsensical and I hate it.
funny. It,
Yep.
I definitely feel like there are iterations that
I'm
could be
I'm
done still.
I was gonna
So,
say I'm pretty sure Shadow Priest is like definitely next most likely to get announced changes and like a blue post and things like that. So I'm not like super worried, but I am also somewhat worried that the focus of like dispersion is in the tree and costs talent points and stuff like that is like going to get too much of the focus, when this talent might go like under the radar and stick around just because they're fixing the other more prominent like vocal issues, obvious issues that people will bring up. And this is like almost on the same level to me, especially because it's 3 talent points, which is even more annoying. Um, And yeah, I don't want it to be forgotten. I want to also vocally announce my vehement hatred for this thing.
Yeah, and all we can do is kind of for the moment hope that, changes are made to that. And I feel like it's gonna be one of those things where if we don't see it soon, there's going to be more of an outcry, even
That's probably
even
true.
further,
Yeah.
right? Because we do have these changes coming in. It's great to see, but in all honesty, it feels like Shadow needed it the most, and to not see that post up front is a little odd. But we also understand that different teams are working on them, so maybe that team still has work to do, or in all honesty, if they're taking the time to make sure they do it right, even better, in my mind at least.
Here's an interesting question for you. Do you want to see I think I know the answer, and I think I might know your answer. Do you want to see more of the other classes' talent trees and then have them implement these iterations for like Shadow and Hunter and Frosty K and things like that they've already announced? Or would you like to see them iterate and get Shadow and Hunter and DK like in a really good spot and then move on to then finishing up the other class trees? But like maybe they can do both at the same time. I don't know, but like if they have to choose one or the other, which would you rather see them do first?
I mean, beforehand, I think I had the opinion that I would want them to hold off on releasing it to get them right originally. But now I
Okay.
think I've kind of transitioned to a position where, I would rather see them out there sooner rather than later so that they can get the um, community feedback that they need sooner rather than later so that it can be addressed. Because seeing these be addressed, or at least a portion of them, right,
Hmm.
is great to see. And my only fear, obviously, playing Resto Shaman is that Shaman's the last one to be released. It does have its little, max group chat. Maybe's on there fighting for us. Maybe Thayun as well. But like,
Hell yeah.
I don't know. My fear is that um it's put off so late that it becomes the next Mistweaver, right? Like
Yep.
I would love for Shaman to see the love that it needs, the same way that anybody that plays their individual class would. And it's gonna feel rough to be whatever that last class released is. So I hope that in thinking how they approach it, that uh they release two at the very end, so nobody can say that they were the last. That's a
Okay.
good approach because they have
Yep.
done that before, where they release two at the same time. But I guess that's where I kind of stand on it. How about you?
Uh, I think I'm pretty much in a similar boat. I think I would rather see them release all the classes first and then worry about going back and iterating on stuff. It gives more time for the people to play around with the ones that they have in place for like the last classes and get feedback going on them earlier in the process. And then by the time that they, you know, are actually able to finish them, hopefully, and get them in a finalized spot, they have all the feedback that they need at that point to say, like, oh, this is what we learned from the other 8 classes, and this is what we learned from the feedback that's already been out there for like a month, and we can know exactly what we need to change and exactly how we need to change it and what the best way to change it would be, and like they'll have it down to a science by that point. That I think is the best case scenario. And yeah, I definitely would also feel bad that my class is getting all the attention. Meanwhile, there's like all the memes of like the kid drowning underwater as a skeleton sitting there, and
Yes.
it's all the resto shamans. Where
Yes.
my class is getting the fourth and fifth update to fix the exact one talent point that needs changing by that point, and yeah,
It
I
it
would feel bad. So
it is funny to think. So like just before this, the preservation of Evoker chat on Max's stream was going on, where I believe they had Growl, Briny, and maybe all chatting with Max about it. And
mhm.
it's just kind of funny to think that Preservation Evoker, the healer Evoker, is the one that might be in a better spot than some of the current healers that have yet to be released because of the changes that they're gonna make, right? And I know they want to make their new class, you know,
Exciting
show
and
up well and
interesting.
in
Yeah.
all forms of content, and I agree with that. Like, believe me, I might have to change my logo on this extended lockout intro page to an evoker
Oh
come the
boy.
next season or something like that. But my point being, like, I don't know. I feel like I understand the concept that they need to release them slowly, that they can't do them all at once. And it made sense to release Evoker with the alpha. That was cool. I do just want to see um, everybody have a meaningful share of this time before release to have the community feedback given and iterated upon.
I will say, I think for the Evoker being like already looking quite strong and having lots of good tools and stuff like that is, I think a lot of times they might feel limited with current classes and stuff. Is like, oh yeah, we have this cool new design for like a raid utility spell, and it's like, resetting the movement CDs, or whatever it is, and they might feel restricted that like they have to choose which spec just like gets a new button for free, and then they like don't have other new stuff to give to other specs that's comparable, and it's just a class that's already relatively balanced on utility for whatever thing, let's say Resto Shaman, like it just gets an extra utility, and now it's like shaking up the meta, and it's just you're stacking Resto Shamans, and it like breaks the way that the game currently works, and so they have to like hold back, and then they just dump all those ideas into a new class kind of thing. So I think that might be some of the reason for that, and I don't know if that makes me worried. Um, but I'm also not a healer player and stuff, and yeah, I don't know.
I think more recently they've done a pretty good job about making it so that you want to play um, each healer in a certain scenario, with a couple of
Mm-hmm.
exceptions, obviously. But like seeing some of these underrepresented specs, like Holy Priest actually showing up, was pretty cool this patch. And
Mm-hmm.
I could not tell you for the life of me what the next, what Dragonflight Vault of the Incarnates is going to look like. Like what even will we be bringing there? Like I can't tell you just yet. I honestly don't know. But I like that kind of process of figuring it out. I would love to see some form of tuning to make things at least a bit more even. Because even like mentioning just Resto Shamans, the on the chat with Max, he was saying like, yeah, Resto Shamans and LA Shamans just kind of need a button to give them something that brings the raid, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Spirit Link is good, and Windrush Totem is good, but like they also feel kind of, I don't know, like they're not impressive at the same time
Yeah,
compared to some other stuff. I feel like so.
this is true. We'll kind of have to see where it goes from there. But meanwhile, with all these changes going on, we do still have the current version of WoW going on, with a newer release coming in just a couple of weeks here on the 2nd of August. We've got Season 4, and there's just still so much that we don't know about what's to come in this. Um, I, maybe you'll want to touch on some of the things specifically, but
Yeah, so I have a big list here. I can just go in my list if you want, but
absolutely,
season
go
4
ahead.
okay. Um like it's about 2 weeks away, and I feel like there's still a lot of important questions to me that don't have answers yet, and I don't like that we're not really getting a whole lot of communication ahead of time. We got a lot when they first announced like the like design of how the loot would work in season 4 and stuff like that, and like their philosophy behind stuff, which I thought was good, but that was like, I don't know, a few months ago at this point probably. Um and we haven't really got much since then, and that covered some stuff, but like there's some stuff that's still missing that has some weird sort of side effects that I don't know if they've figured out yet or has been brought up to them as an important thing that they need to pay attention to. But like, for example, legendaries right now are 291, and the next raid loot at Mythic is I think 304, and then goes up to 311 or something for the
That's about right.
higher
Yeah,
item level bosses.
yeah.
And so it's like, are you going to intentionally craft your legendaries on the weakest stat budget slots to because they're stuck at 291 compared to the higher item level stuff that you can get in Mythic? Like that seems like counterintuitive and like not what they intend for the design of those. Are conduits going to be getting some sort of item level increase um, in
Do we have to
season
get
4
3K again?
that you have to farm for? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, if not, and conduits stay at 278, my thing was like, I think I brought this up last podcast episode, maybe, was if you're like at 2.8k in season 3, and then season 4 starts, and your Mythic Plus score is reset down to 0, and you have to farm up to try and get 3k again, like, that seems like it feels bad. So, like, is there going to be catch up for 278 conduits, maybe? Um, the Sylvanas Legendary Bow for hunters. This is a personal importance for me. It's not on the vendor that you can like pick items for, but it's like every other weapon and trinket is on there, but except the bow. And it is weird because it's unique. And so if you already have the bow, and especially like if it's in void storage or something like that for people even, it's you can't just like buy a second one, right? So they probably can't put the bow itself on the vendor, but maybe the upgrade items to increase the item level of it. Uh
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
the bow couldn't appear in the Great Vault in season 2 in Sanctum. So like is it going to be able to appear in the Great Vault in season 4? Who knows? Um will you need to kill a boss on the difficulty to unlock that boss's loot in the Great Vault? As the same as it has worked in like all the Shadowlands seasons so far. So like you can't get jailer loot until like week 3, for example, because in your Great Vault specifically, because you haven't like killed him in season 4 yet.
With the exception of tier sets right now, right? Because like
Right, I was gonna say,
yeah.
and will tier sets still be separate from that and can always appear? Yeah, that's an important question.
How do
Um,
we acquire upgraded tier sets in this next
I
patch? Even
think they
yeah.
I think they said that the creation catalyst will still exist. I'm pretty sure they've said that. Um,
Which is cool, but then that's a slow progression again, unless it's like you
I
keep your
think the
charges.
charges, yeah, I think the charges they might just make the charges like unlimited or something. I don't know, but that's yeah, also an important question. Um, but yeah, the Sylve Bow also because it's unique and it can't drop after you've got it the first time. It was also untradeable, so it made it like and it could because it couldn't appear in the Great Vault. It was just like the hardest item to acquire in the game period for all of Shadowlands so far. And so if you're doing all these changes to like make loot more acquirable, more deterministic, and you're just leaving like the hardest item not making any increases to it, I feel like that's kind of backwards and feels bad for the people that use the bow, which is hunters. So like I feel like it's kind of required that they put it on the vendor at least to like give it something. Like even if it doesn't appear in Great Vault still, which I think it should appear in both, but whatever. It should be in one or the other at least. I think as a concession maybe. Um, will the weapons in Castle Nathria still be token drops? And like, will the weapons in Sanctum
Oh
and
yeah.
Sepulchre not be tokens? Because that seems weird a little bit. Like they should just convert them all to be one or the other style rather than the weird mix. I feel like. Um, the tier set items are those only going to drop in Sepulchre? Are there going to be like tier tokens dropping in the other raids? Maybe potentially. Who knows? Is Cross Realm Mythic going to be available from the start of season 4? And like, is there a Hall of Fame for season 4? I think there's no Hall of Fame. I'm pretty sure. I don't know that they've announced that, but like, I feel pretty confident that that's a no. But the Cross Realm Mythic, I'm not sure on. I feel like it should just be open from the start, though. I don't know why it wouldn't be, but who knows? But like, they haven't given clear answers to these questions, and they feel important. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. I
I had a big list.
Well, it's a very meaningful list because, I fully agree. I feel like a lot of those could be answered very, very simply in just one little thing. But I also understand their concept that, Alpha is a bit more of their priority right now. It was always
Absolutely.
known that this season 4 was just kind of going to be more of a for fun,
Mm-hmm.
some way to provide content, see if it kind of works type of thing. So I agree though that in order for it to work, you do have to have all of these points made. So
Well, and I think the biggest one, obviously, sort of the elephant in the room, probably is what's the difficulty expectation that the faded raids are going to be? We don't even know how the affixes work for most of these. Like, do they appear on poll? Do they appear like as a constant thing every 30 seconds or something? Is it going to be like based on the fight timers? Like, how do that half of the affixes work? But also, just like, yeah, is a CE guild going to be able to go in and clear in the first week? Is that like an expectation that they should have? Like, what's the target? You know, what's the goal that they're trying to hit for the difficulty? Because we've certainly seen it be all over the spectrum of over the course of Shadowlands, even just in Sepulchre alone, where a raid can be extremely hard and extremely nerfed and extremely easy. Like I think people were also asking, like, are we going to get the nerfed version of bosses or the unnerfed version? I'm pretty sure they're just going to keep the nerfed version
it's
of
the
the
nerf
bosses.
versions, yeah. And I
Yeah,
almost feel like there
that doesn't
was
seem to be a question to me. But I think the difficulty like target in general is kind of a vague question that we should have at least some idea of what they're expecting on so that we can know like I feel like it's good and important that we could say like Huntsman Altamore, I think the first like day of Castanethra or something got nerfed because it was too hard initially, and stuff was just doing like way too much damage. And so I think it would be good if they say like a CE guild should expect to go in and clear this like within the first week, within 9 hours or whatever. And there's certain bosses that we encounter that are a wall, and like this boss is going to be 100 to 150 pulls that we can say like, hey, this isn't matching your target, and probably needs some adjustment here.
Yeah, and I will say, I think I had a conversation with Salma recently where he did mention that he had seen something where Ian had come out and said that it was the nerf version and that it was going intended to be an easier season significantly relevant to Sepulchre. I'd have to find the source specifically for that, but
Interesting.
I think that's something that we could comfortably rely upon.
I
Eh,
think based on their interview responses for Dragonflight that we saw, where they were like, we're giving up the arms race against Race for the First Guild, and we went too far and things like that.
Yep.
And they're pulling.
Yeah.
They definitely said they're pulling back for the first raid of Dragonflight, which I thought was good. But so I think it's likely that they're also doing that for season 4. Would be my expectation. But it's good to just clear up the uh the uncertainty in general, regardless. Even if there's maybe hints towards that already, I feel like just setting clear expectations is only a good thing, personally.
Yeah. And either way, I do feel like there will be a breath of life into the game. I already know a lot of people that are going to be coming back and going hard in M plus just to make sure that they get the gear for raid and all that type of stuff, right? Because that might be a somewhat reasonable acquisition of gear still.
I
We'll
believe
kind of
they
have to
said
see.
Valor is going to be uncapped from the start
I think it was
for
Valor
season
was
4.
uncapped, and then Conquest was going to have a higher cap than it normally does, but not uncapped. So yeah, that will be really cool. If it really is uncapped, that means that you could just kind of go ham that first week.
Yep.
Sounds all good to me. But um, any
It
other?
also sounds like a lot to do in the first week if you're really wanting to optimize your character for raid. So I'm hoping the raids are easy enough that that's not necessary is the way I would describe it.
I agree. I do like the concept though that there's more to do because I will say currently in the game I think about logging in and I'm like, oh, I really want to do a key, and then I remind myself it's like, well, in
I
2 weeks'
have full
time.
272. Yeah.
Well, like even for alts, I like say to myself, well, in a couple weeks' time, that's gonna be
Right.
obsolete. I'll be able to get
Yeah.
more from doing a current version of 15 then,
Mhm.
and everybody's gonna want to be running them. There's gonna be so many more groups in the group finder, even right, like just that
Yep.
whole concept. Guildies will want to be doing that, so that'll be an easier in quotes carry for some undergeared characters and all of that. But I don't know. We'll kind of have to see how season 4 plays out. Um, any other points that you wanted to bring up about season 4?
I think that was most of the important ones that I covered, and even some of the lesser important ones. Like the Sylvanas bow is like there's other bows that are high item level. We're not playing Kyrian anymore, so it doesn't sync up with Resonating Arrow. It's like it's probably not that important, but like, come on, it's the legendary weapon of like the whole expansion. Like, it's got to be a little important, right?
Yeah, you heard it here. He wants it twice in the same expansion. Greedy hunters, right?
I've already
But no,
got it
I know,
twice, technically.
I know, I'm joking.
Okay.
But then looking beyond season 4, kind of back to Alpha, there is the Evoker that's coming out. We're not going to go in depth on the Evoker because obviously there's a lot that can change with that. They haven't even seen the talent iteration based off of
I think some
feedback.
of it might not even be working properly right now, also.
Yes, that is correct.
And there's a lot of DCs happening also with some of their abilities from what I've seen.
There's DCs, there's like CDR applying to other evokers in your party off of
Oh,
your own
cool.
abilities. Like, yeah, so there's definitely changes to be made. It's an
So it's
alpha,
it's the outlaw buff.
I guess, unintended, right? But
Too
there's
soon, sorry.
that's funny, but there's very quick summary. There's an ability for evokers that's like a perfect mixture of Riptide and Renewing Mist, where it does some good initial heal, and then when it's hot, critically strikes, it helps renew itself. Um, so there was something about like if you got two evokers and they both have that on the person, and one of them crits, it extends both of them. So that would
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
promote the stacking of evokers as healers. It's just crazy
Oh,
concepts altogether.
oh
So
boy.
obviously, lots of change. All we can talk about are the things that we know about that could easily be addressed a lot earlier, such as like more of the customization pool. So I know that's kind of more of your forte. If you want to chat more about the things that you have seen or thoughts that you have, kind
Well,
of bring up the
I
customization
mean,
on the side screen.
there's sort of like the general community sentiment, I would say, that like so far people are, I would say, have mixed reactions at best to some of the evoker stuff. Like the I guess body proportions would be what I would call it, or the like body type kind of thing where people want their dragon to be beefier and more musclier and whatnot. Um, that has been out there, and they did add like 4 different body types, and I thought the upper one was pretty good, but I still wanted to see more, and I think there's a lot more that they can go more extreme past that that still fits in with the like Warcraft sort of art style aesthetic. Um, and then also for me, especially, it's the neck and the head are like too thin and too small and not don't look proportioned right. Like even if they have the same body proportions that like the 1 through 4 currently exist, it's like the head is still too small on all 4 of them. And there's some pictures on Twitter of like people that have done edits to it and have compared them against other stuff in game in Dragonflight in the zones and stuff like that. And so, uh, I don't know. I was just curious what your thoughts were on that. I definitely personally agree with that. I'm kind of in the camp of like it's not the ideal look that I would choose, but I feel like I probably wouldn't have chosen a dragon race in general in the first place, kind of. So like in a similar way to like I wouldn't choose to play a troll or a tauren personally, but those still fit the art style of WoW, and maybe that's just because they've always been there. But and Evoker feels like it doesn't, maybe. But yeah, I think more options is just always good in general. So I
Yeah,
think the
I,
4 we have are good, but we can get more than 4, right? Like I don't know.
yeah, I will say that it does feel like they have gone really in depth. Like the screen that I'm showing is kind of showing all the little customizations you can do in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like hair color, the skin color, the different faces, like all those little things that they obviously emphasized. But I feel like one of the big overarching ones is, like you said, the body type of the
A
Dracthyr. Because
silhouette is like super important for like
oh,
art style stuff.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like they could spend more time with that. I would say I agree with you. I have seen plenty of examples where people have taken their own pen to it and made it look really good. Um, I don't personally play so much for the look of my character. If you look at mine, I'm literally a goblin because it has goblin jump, and I'm
That is
just
true.
sticking with it. I run the worst transmogs I can find intentionally, like that type of thing. I will say though, like the whole concept, there's the likening between organs and Dracthyr, where like how much time are you really going to spend in the human form versus like in the dragon form? And it kind of seems like over 99% of the time you will be in the dragon form. So that should be the portion that receives the most love, in my opinion.
Um,
Um, and I
I
don't
did.
really feel like it's
I,
seen that.
I did see some people like on initial announcement and stuff like that. They were speculating that you could spend more of the what I would call like normal casting stuff in human form in combat, and then you would similar to how like demon hunters turn into their demon form for like metamorphosis, obviously, but then also like eye beam or whatever. And that if you used the dragon abilities like the dive bomb, like deep breath thing, and those type of things that you would use, or the breath that you would use the dragon form for like those casts specifically, but then you would go back to human form if you wanted. I think that's an option that would be good for people. That it would let them see their transmog more if they didn't want to just be limited to like the dragon form armor transmogs that are in the character creation stuff. So I think that's an option that would maybe be worth exploring if that is a possibility. I don't know how you would make that toggle like easily available in game. Um, but yeah, that's something that I think would be good too. Maybe if they could experiment with that.
Yeah, the only thing that I've seen that like actually has a real gameplay aspect to it is I want to say it was like either a talent or like a passive or whatever it was that you could regenerate health switching into the human form significantly faster, but that's out of combat. So
Mm.
you can imagine being in Mythic Plus, like, I don't know, maybe you are transitioning from
Switching
pack to
between
pack,
packs. Yeah.
or waiting for some RP that every Mythic Pluser hates after a boss. Like
Oh,
you'll naturally
I
heal
saw
up,
this
right?
on Twitter of like people saying in the dungeons like no more angels in Spires of Ascension or
Yep.
whatever for Dragonflight dungeons, and
It
I absolutely echo that sentiment. I like Spires as a dungeon too. It's one of my favorite dungeons of the expansion so far, actually. But yeah, not a fan of the angels part. The rest of it's pretty good, but
yeah, this whole concept of we can slightly transition over to this concept of like RP and dungeons. I feel like there is some that is warranted, some that's like a great time for a healer to drink or for you to reassess a little bit, but there's some RP that just takes far too long in places that doesn't make sense necessarily. And I understand that they developed the dungeons around that RP, and I think it's something that they can start to keep in mind as they develop these new ones for Dragonflight, right?
yeah,
Because
well,
if
especially if Mythic Plus is going to be a mainstay like staple going forward, and it's a main like they don't design raids without thinking of how the raid is going to play out. You know, like they design a skip now, pretty standard,
uh,
um, in every
yeah.
raid for the most part. Like they should design the dungeons with Mythic Plus in mind. You know, they design the mega dungeons with Mythic Plus in mind. I think to some extent. Um, I think they should definitely have that in their planning going forward.
All I can think about in relation to what you said is that RP after stage one of Sylv. It's just so perfect that if nobody's watched it, or if somebody hasn't watched it, you all have to sit there and wait. And I don't know. The concept of RP and raids is unique in and of itself, but you're right about it, like using the skip to get to the end bosses and whatnot. But um yeah, I don't know. And then even back just to the Dracthyr, like I definitely feel like there's more that could be done. I feel like one of the things also is like, you know, you have a lot of customization from the front, but realistically everybody plays looking over the shoulder, over head of the back of the character, right? So I feel like there's more that could be done there. Like there was some customization that I'd seen where like, you know,
A lot of it's
obviously it
like
was
spikes
but
on the
yes,
back and the tail, and yeah.
but even like there was customization on the like the back and chest. And if you looked at it, like there was a perfect cut line as it transitioned to the head. So
Oh,
like
yeah.
it just did not look good whatsoever. Like
Mm,
obviously you'd have to match it with the head, but like that's part of them giving you some crazy number of customizations that you can do.
right.
So I don't know, like I like the thought that they're trying to give it lots of customization, maybe focus a bit more on the dragon form, make that look good so the community doesn't have as much of backlash towards it as the open beta releases type of thing, you know?
Yep. And then my other question for you was, do you have a plan so far of making your evoker, whether you're going to choose, because the dragon form is always the same. I think I don't think that that's gendered as
Yeah,
far as I know, but
correct.
the visage form, the human form, although it's not always human, but anyway, if it's going to be the female like human or the male blood elf, basically, of which one you thought you were going to choose so far,
Um I
if
mean
you
like
had a plan.
my characters are fairly evenly split. I think they even made a point about this. They like changed it from being male or female to body one or body two to be more inclusive. But
Yeah,
what
I
I w-
wasn't sure of a better way. I guess blood elf and human kind of, but human, I feel like it covers both. So I was a
yeah.
little bit confused if that was a good way to differentiate it. But
Yeah, but in terms of like I don't know, like I made a Worgen fairly recently, like just a bit of as a meme, you know,
okay,
like I said beforehand, I make my characters a bit of a meme intentionally, and so I look at like I made a Death Knight to learn a bit more about Blood DK, and I made it a Worgen. I realized how much time I spent out of the human form, and as cool as I wanted to make the human form, some old dude, because that's just kind of what I pictured as like a Worgen Death Knight as being like this old white haired dude, and then he turns into a Worgen, and it's like an all like white haired Worgen being like referencing old, something like that, right? I don't know. Like I don't care so much about the human form. Cool part is I'll be able to change it if I need to. I
that's
don't
true.
know. Like I'd probably start with the female form my guess. I don't know, but like that aspect of it isn't as important to me as to some other people. How about you?
I was pretty 50-50. I've gone back and forth because I've played Blood Elf for a long time, so I kind of like the change in variety maybe of going female human, but I don't really like the female human models and animations much. So I might just stick with male Blood Elf anyway. But we'll find out. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. And it is kind of cool to see, like, I understand that it's like reusing the models, right? You're reusing the blood elf and reusing the human models, but um like you touched on, it would be weird to kind of say, like, as opposed to body one, body two, or male or female, to like say blood elf or human. But it has kind of incorporated this idea now that we're starting to see even in live play where, you know, we are working together as two different factions, right? Like you can imagine a human and a blood elf on the same side, and this whole concept that, received a lot of backlash at first that I personally think has gone really, really well for the game. When you include both factions, you increase the player pool. I've been able to play with some players that I had been friends with for a very long time ago, that went Alliance, and obviously wasn't going to transfer any characters Alliance because all of my gold was on Horde and all of my friends were on Horde, and so it's kind of like almost like saying goodbye a long time ago when they transferred to Alliance, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
with this change, I think it's pretty good. I am interested to see if there are any bugs going into season 4 with
Yes.
cross faction gameplay. I don't think there would be too many. Like we've already seen some, like you can't use a vendor mount, or you can't click on a portal, like a lock portal that
Mm-hmm.
an alliance player is summoning if you're horde.
They're pretty minor, negligible things though, all things considered. Which, if that's what it takes to have cross faction, I am completely fine with those as the one little issues.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely agree. And
and I changed my main. I am a night elf now. Hooray!
yes, you are a night elf, but we will see for how long based on Savo's post, right?
I I'm pretty sure guilds of some form will, although they haven't said it's like top priority for Dragonflight for them, and it might be in a later patch, but like I'm pretty sure that they're gonna want to get that in for Dragonflight release. But
The concept
I
of a
think they're,
cross-faction guild, you're saying?
yeah,
Or,
yeah, or some
cross-faction.
way that it at least like it functions for tracking cross faction for achievements and Warcraft logs and stuff like
Yeah, I wanna say that Warcraft Logs was already more lenient or something along those lines because
that. Yeah,
I wanna
there's
say
different
in-game, you need
specific rules
16
for stuff.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you need 16 people, I wanna say, in-game for a relevant guild achievement. But then I wanna say in, like, Warcraft Logs or Rio or some of the other third-party sites, it was, like, only 11. So just, like,
Hmm.
a slight majority, you know?
Well, especially if group loot is going to be a thing for raid groups
Yes.
in Dragonflight, that like is that also going to be at a 16 cutoff, and is that going to be faction restricted for some reason, or is that because the people on the other faction can't be in the same guild, right? So is that going to prevent you from using group loot? I hope not. So
Yeah,
hopefully
true.
they figure that out.
Yeah, I would like to see if group loot were tested in season 4, personally, just so they can fix any of the problems that they have with it at a
I
time.
would be on board with that.
Yeah. I doubt that they will make that transition with a little over 2 weeks until that actually happens, but
Probably.
a man can dream.
Yep.
Um, but like, I have agreed with the sentiment that a lot of people have said that people against cross faction are maybe not even the people that are playing retail necessarily, or if
Well,
they
I
have.
also think they implemented it in a good way where if you still want to be faction restricted for your own whatever immersion or role playing aspect or whatever, like you can still do that. I think that was a good compromise and a good way to implement it in a way that I think kept both people pretty happy overall. Like I I don't really understand the concept of like how other people playing cross faction lessens your experience if that's what you wanted to do. Like, why does it matter what other people are doing that you never interact with in the first place, on their own time that you're not involved in? So, yeah, to me, that's a little bit weird that people would take issue with that. So, I think it's been great, basically. It has no real downsides aside from minor, I can't repair off your mount type thing, which, yeah.
Yeah, and if you were against the concept of that, right, you probably wouldn't want to repair off of an alliance's mount anyway or something like that,
Probably
right?
true. Yep.
Yes, but it is kind of cool to see how well it's been received, how well it's been working. Let's just see that next step taken. I would really like to see, cross-faction guilds be a
Mhm.
top priority going forward
I
so that
would
we can maintain this.
100% agree with. Yes.
Yeah, because we are already as a guild in that tough position of, just to clarify what I said earlier, tough position of, like if third-party websites are only tracking our progression, if we are all or a majority on the same faction, then we're gonna have to make the tough decision to join everybody to one faction, whether it's Horde, whether it's Alliance. I think the majority will naturally be Horde. So it's a tough thing to ask of the raiders. Um, so and it's already something we bring up when discussing with trials, like, hey, this is something that we might need you to do. You
I
know?
think it's also fairly likely that if guilds can't be cross faction by the time of Dragonflight release, that the third party sites and tracking and stuff like that, like they might just develop a workaround for it where you can say, this is my Horde associated guild and this is the Alliance associated guild under this guild name, and you um like combine the tracking together of both of them or something. Because I know they already do have some stuff like that. If you have, for example, two raid teams in the same guild, that you can track them separately. So they might just develop workarounds for it if it's not the case. I generally people are smart, and if there's a want and a desire for a thing, people make the thing. So
I
I'm
agree. Yep.
I'm optimistic, but not going to 100% rely on that either. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful that that would be the case, just because the flip side of that coin is that if that isn't the case, and individuals aren't capable of finding a relevant guild because it's split, that reduces their chance at recruitment. And as everybody knows, no real guild sticks together forever, and so you will lose players over the course of time. And when you go to refill those slots, if you're not easily filtered by whatever form of sorting that these third-party sites have, but that's going to be a massive issue going forward. So just hope that it is addressed. Like, but similar to your point of view, I agree. It's something that will be addressed. It's just a question of how at this time
How
and
soon?
when.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Um, and then I know one of the last things that we were going to touch on was the tier sets, because while we don't know their effects, we have seen a couple of them. Well, actually, all of them now released just recently. Like to start off with the Demon Hunter tier set, which is a very funny one to start off with. Kind of want to show what the set looks like very quickly. Keep in mind, all of these are going to be on the human model. It's already been addressed. Like I think what you said, WoW had apologized for the Druid one in particular, just because it's like it's not going
It
to be on a
looks like they have
human.
it on the Demon Hunter one there too, at the just above the picture showing it. It's like the last line.
Oh, we apologize. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But elves are
Um,
currently having an issue, right?
yeah, and at the bottom it has the like concept art of uh the classes and stuff like that.
Yep.
I'd say the one thing for me so far with the Demon Hunter one is that I would like the set a lot more if basically he was wearing a shirt. And because I think that matches the concept art a bit better if there was just, it doesn't have to be a fancy anything, it just having some sort of base color, but I feel like it looks really wonky and weird with the like chest straps on just the bare chest underneath kind of thing. um yeah, so that's the one feedback I would give for Demon Hunter so far, but otherwise like it's pretty good. I
That's
feel
so.
like the feet are also maybe kind of like thin looking and they could be bulkier, but that might just be the human model. I'm not sure.
I would say that's kind of like a natural trait of demon hunters is actually that concept of having an open body a little bit like that. Like
Hmm.
if I think of the demon hunter transmogs that I've seen,
Right. Yes.
that is largely inclusive of the ones that
Well,
I think of.
but
But
I
yeah.
with such like a heavy covered like face and shoulders and pants and stuff like that, like it's not like the pants are like shorts that are like cut off at the knee or something like that, and the gloves are like super bulky, like thick, plate gloves that like cover most of the wrist and even up to the elbow almost and things like that. So I feel like there's some sort of like disconnect in the design of those, because for Demon Hunter in general, yes, you're absolutely correct. I think it would also be cool if they had, and they might have this already, I can't remember for sure, but like they have some chess pieces that are like the chest itself and then the chest with a robe, like
Yep, yep,
pants.
yep.
And so if they can do two versions where it's like the chest with a shirt and like the chest with the bare chest, I think that would be cool. But maybe that's being too optimistic. I don't know. But
Yeah, and all in all, one of the things to keep in mind as we look through all of these, we are looking at one set of the tier. Obviously, the tier changes among the LFR, the normal, the heroic, and mythic difficulty. Like that's how it works now. It's how we fully expect it to work in the future. I think that
well, and usually there's two or three colors for PvP also, right? So you get
that
like
too.
six
too.
or seven total color variants. Yeah.
Yeah, so like we're looking at a set. This might be the LFR set based on how it looks, and you look at the concept art, and that obviously looks a lot more epic because of the color changes and whatnot, right? But so we can be hopeful in terms of how it will look in the future, and also that it would look better on a different model. But we can kind of transition. Oh, I actually start with DH1, but can go back to the DK, and we can try to go alphabetically from there. This
Sure.
one is pretty unique. I've seen some pretty split thoughts on it. The helmet is very, very tall.
Yeah, the horns on the helmet are very like horizontal and sideways.
Yeah.
And I feel like they would, maybe it's just the picture, but I feel like the horns need to be either more forward or more backward and have like they look flat, I guess is the best description. And it looks kind of weird, but I mean, other than that, it's pretty good. I don't really have any complaints with this one.
Yeah, looking at the concept art, the little thought that like for a lot of the plate sets they make the person a bit bulkier, so you could imagine it being
Mhm.
on like a Tauren or something like that. I feel like it might look cooler because right now it does feel like the head is a little bit disproportionate to the shoulders potentially, but it's kind of cool. Like if you look deep into the shoulders, it almost looks like two dragons, the frostworm spirit,
Mhm.
pass that they can
Yes.
send out, all that stuff. So there's like a little like this whole concept of the primalist, right? Like the vault of the incarnates. It's supposed to be like an earlier concept, very
I think it's like very elemental dragons kind of
yeah, yeah,
inspired.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so just kind of going back to early concepts for any form of gear. Like I like that they are all this elemental focused, and we'll see that more as we go through. But we can kind of transition to the druid tier set, which yes looks funny on a human, but I don't think it looks the worst. I think that it's another druid set. That they've got their claws, they've got their almost beak looking thing. They've got like talons on the shoulders, almost like an owl headpiece in general, feathers down below, that type of thing.
Yeah, the one thing for me is like the collar area looks like a beard in this color
Yeah.
variation specifically. Other than that, yeah, it looks kind of druidy, and I think the helm could also maybe be more elongated in the back as well with like the I don't know feathers kind of headdress thing, um, compared to the concept art especially. But other than that, it looks fine.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see what aspects of the concept art that the teams focused on when developing these, right? Like you look at the druid headpiece and it's a lot more about the top to it and the flow back, right? And if you look at the one here, it's a bit more present. Obviously, we're looking at a human model, yada yada, but you can already tell the differences just up front, right?
Hmm.
Um, they're kind of interesting. I don't personally have many more things to comment about that. I will probably play Resto Druid either way, no matter how this looks. So
Is
you know
that
what
your
I meant.
plan for
Oh no no
Dragonflight?
no! I just mean like playing all the healers to some
Gotcha.
extent. Like
As an alt or something.
I
Gotcha.
think my intent personally is to play all of the ranged healers. I
Okay.
am not a big fan of how the melee healers feel. Not even just being in melee, not even the concept of ranged versus melee, but like as to what's important to the rotation for me.
Um, then just to touch on real quick because you brought it up, how do you feel about Evoker being like a mid-range, short-ish range healer stuff so far, where they have like a 25 yard I think max range on most of their stuff? Do
Yeah,
you have thoughts
so
on that so far? If that
yeah, I mean, I'll transition over to the Evoker tier set as something to look at, but I think it's a really interesting concept. Already I can think about the more recent fights that we've done. And so, like in let's just take Jailer for example, because a majority of people have cleared Jailer now, and it's a good fight as an example because it's a long one, lots of
The
different.
numbers have increased quite drastically.
Yeah, I would bring up that chart, but I might cry internally. So the phase one, like you are fairly grouped with
Hmm.
some line of sight mechanics. Kind of annoying. Personally, I didn't view that as that big of an issue. Like you topped people before they ran off with their bombs, whatever, right?
Hmm.
I think that um a place that you would really notice being an evoker that would kind of suck is phase two,
Yep.
when you have just such a widespread group. You've got four people out on this wing, four people out on another wing. You've got a
Yep.
bunch of people all grouped together. Like, yeah, they could be the group healer in the center, but I feel like that's kind of more the Pally's job. I don't know. I'm in a weird spot with this concept of a 25-yard range. I'd very much have to see how it plays out. And I know that they've got in their toolkit things to help adjust that. But just imagine to yourself, like, something as stupid. Whenever, for some reason, I think of this, I think of the initial pull of Fate Scribe for whatever reason when I think about
Okay.
range. Something incredibly stupid, but maybe it's because of the intermission that I think about it. But anyways, you think about on pull and you've got like a range group, you've got a melee group up against the boss. And if you're
Yep.
trying to be that perfect in between thing, and you need to heal somebody or you need to dash into melee for whatever reason, maybe you use your rescue, I think, which is like the leap that heals and whatnot, you are
Hmm.
now out of range of the other half of your group, and you don't
Right.
necessarily have the best things in your toolkit to get back there unless you want to do something stupid like fly with me a warrior back to mid range so he can charge back in. He's not going to be
Yep.
very happy about it, but like that it's a weird concept. Very interesting to see how the utility plays out. Um, I very much just need to see it, but what I will say that's cool about the Evoker without going too far in depth, because we were supposed to be talking about tier sets,
Yep.
is the concept that their damage can greatly affect their healing. I'm so happy to see another healer where either they have abilities that they can cast that either do damage or heal, and that benefits them in both ways. The ways that their like giant dragon breath ability that you think of, and I'm not talking about the green one that sprays like dream stuff over people and heals them, but I'm talking about the literal fire breath. Like there is
Yep.
synergies with that to make you heal. Like awesome. I want to be a healer that can do that cool dragon breath thing just like everybody else. And that was my long-winded response. But looking at the Evoker tier set, interesting enough, it is on a Blood Elf. Wow, that is cool.
Amazing.
Yep,
Technology.
the technology is now here. And it's so funny to me, like when I first saw the Evoker set, I was like, oh, that's a Demon Hunter set. And then I
Yeah.
saw the Demon Hunter on the same page, I was
I
like, oh, that's the Demon Hunter set.
I do also can see how that looks very Demon Hunterish. I think this looks awesome. I think the color scheme helps a lot, probably, compared to the other ones, which are just kind of a flat white. I think those are probably like the base, like honor gear or the either LFR or normal version, most likely. Um, and this is probably the mythic color, I would guess, or heroic, or elite PvP gladiator, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, looks awesome. Thumbs up.
Would be cool, personally, in my mind, if they made the headpiece a little bit tighter on the head. It looks very much like it's floating above it. Like if you look
I
at the
could see
front,
that.
like the side guards or whatever you want to call them are just so far away from the helmet. And I
I think
understand
I think they might want to be giving you the opportunity to show off your Dracthyr customization facial stuff because that has a lot of stuff
that is
going on with
true.
the tattoos and whatnot. So that might be a reason for that, for playing devil's advocate, sort of. But
Yeah, and it's cool that it's a male set as well, right? Because the Dracthyrs are gonna be wearing male. Not that like I could.
I I hope there's offset pieces. I want this on my hunter. I will steal this so
That's
big.
yeah. Well, then we can look at Hunter next, because also that's alphabetical. But tell me your thoughts on the Hunter set.
Okay. Okay. Hold on. Because I can see how they got this from the concept art, but like it also does not look like the concept art. The glove things are the main thing because the glove pointy bits did not exist in the concept art. Now these glove pointy bits do exist as like a common theme throughout all of the tier sets on all the classes kind of. I feel like they would work better as like thigh pads or knee pads or even just like upper elbow area or something. They feel weirdly placed and they look like flippers of like a penguin or something. I feel like they don't fit. And I feel like the boots also need like some color, maybe more purpley compared to the on the bottom. I don't know. It's like I get the idea. It doesn't quite land for me in this version, but I think that also might be the human making it look worse than I'm expecting.
Well, there are human hunters, and there's the meme, or not the meme, I guess it's the movie reference of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Well, Honey, I Grew the hand pads, and they look like flippers. So there's
These
that.
shoulders are also massive and gigantic, and the helm seems kind of small.
You know what's so funny is because of that, when I first looked at it, especially the one that's like the image from the back, which you're going to be seeing more frequently, I thought it was a boomkin at first because of like the way that
It looks
the
very
helmet
boomkin, that's
looks.
true.
Yeah, it's like, oh, boomkin. But no.
I can see that. All right. Nice. So
Well,
yeah, I'm not like thrilled, but like this also is by far not even close to one of the worst hunter tier sets that has ever existed, and I'm it's above average, and like that's kind of saying something, so I can't be too upset either. So I will use some of these pieces probably and be happy with them. I think the helm and the shoulders have like a little bit of a disconnect, and like I might use one or the other separately, but probably not together. Maybe I don't know.
yeah, and you know, I mean, I agree. I do think this is another one of the sets where I feel like color could definitely
Help a
fix
lot.
this. Yes,
Yeah,
yes. If
for
you
sure.
imagine it to, because I know the concept art was also in a somewhat similar color, where this one feels a bit brighter. But you know, like if you've got a deep red one, I feel like a lot of the deep red sets look naturally pretty good. But we'll have to see. And then we can kind of transition into another one that's in that same concept art page, the mages. Um, I think there are aspects of this that are cool and aspects that are not. Personally, how about you?
Okay. I mean, overall, like, it looks very similar to the concept art for me, and I like it a lot. The main thing that seems kind of boring to me is the chest and the back, uh, like perspective on it. I feel like that could use a little bit more. Like the back of the hood and the back of the legs kind of just have a whole lot of nothing going on. Um, hope there's a cool cape, I guess, that fits that set, to maybe help with that or something. But the rest of it seems pretty fine.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like they've given a lot of
I
emphasis on the legs here, right? Like you
I
see,
was gonna
there's a
say
lot.
I am not sure that I'm a fan of the toes.
Oh, that's funny, yeah. But like the concept that the legs got a lot of love, and or maybe it's even just the belt piece, and that's like a new hanging feature off of the belt or whatever. But like those icicles there, I feel like they could have definitely done a lot more with the chest piece in regards to them. Because like imagine you transmog this without every piece besides the chest. Like the chest is the only piece you have transmogged. How the heck would you even know that's a mage? You know, like that just looks like a typical chess piece, right?
Yeah, kind of. I'm wondering if there's a robe version of this that might exist with still the 3D icicle things as part of the legs.
Hmm. Yeah,
Because
interesting.
I feel like this would look a lot better with a robe, but sometimes they do both, and sometimes they just give you one option. Which, like I said earlier, like more options the better. Like, give me more choices of stuff. Like, let me be a female blood elf and a male human. You know, at least for the visage forms or something. If you don't want to do, I think they should have all the races. But like, I think that's a little bit extreme and probably a lot of work. So
Yeah,
at least do like both, genders that already exist for the two races that you went with or something. I think that would be a good compromise. Stuff like that. But then people are getting weird too. Sorry, I'm just
no,
sidetracking,
no,
ranting
good,
for
good.
a quick second. The people are getting weird where they are wanting it to be like, and part of this was the philosophy of Blizzard too. It's not just people spawning this out of nowhere, but um, was like saying that evokers are a caster or Dracthyr are a caster, so they have to be this slim androgynous thing. But like male Taurens can already be like priests and casters in the game, and they look like they have tree trunks. or limbs.
That's
So
funny.
like, yeah, I think the Dracthyr can have a little bit of variation in body type and stuff like that, and still be fine and fit in the game and make sense. You know, I don't see people like hating every male Tauren for like being in the game that plays priest or something, you know, or plays druid or whatever. So I find
Yeah.
that a bit silly, but that
Well,
was
you
my quick.
you were allowed a rant given I gave 3 on Evoker. But we can switch over to Monk, and I know that like a lot of these last ones are going to be relatively quick. I mean, but look at the Monk. Like they really like this concept of storing your chi on your shoulders or something like that, huh?
Okay, I like the chi shoulders.
You do.
So
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, I like this set a lot actually. Um, again, I'm not sure I'm sold on the feet and the bare hands look. That's just like a general thing that always kind of like, I don't know. I like seeing the armor more than my base character. It feels like empty, I guess. Like I wouldn't play with like hidden boots or hidden gloves a lot of the time. I want to see like the full sort of like the Iron Man suit look, I guess. I don't know what I would call it, but like the
Okay.
fully covered thing. Um, but it does make a lot of sense for like a monk specifically thematically, so I'm kind of mostly fine with it here. And I don't really play monk that often, uh but yeah, I like I like the shoulder orbs. So yeah, I'm on board.
I
No
think
real issues with this.
yeah, and there's the concept that's shown on a human, right? But like, what's so interesting is in the concept art, it was very clear. Like they made certain characters smaller and other characters bigger. Like the concept art
Yeah.
for the monk shows like a much bigger paladin and warrior because that fits the class fantasy of those a bit better,
Hmm.
right? And like monk being a bit more nimble and thin and all that, like just like what you talked about with the whole Tauren priest thing, right? But like I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting to see how it's going to play out. Not that you can't be a human monk or anything, but you know what I'm saying.
I do like that in the concept art, the hands had a lot more glow, and the little like tassels on the helmet had a bit more glow on the back end too. I feel like that, and and on the belt like sash thing, loincloth,
Hmm.
whatever. I don't know what you even call it. So I like having just a few more hits of vibrant color. I think would help this set a lot. That are
Agree.
similar to the orb color.
I
Just tie
agree.
it in a bit fewer more places across the set.
Yeah, and actually, as we transition to the next one, the Paladin tier set, that was one of the things where they came out and showed that that actually wasn't the case. So, like beforehand, you could see the face behind the helmet that I'm showing here, but in the concept art, it was like darkened or shadowed out almost.
Hmm.
And once it was fixed, the set, in my opinion, looked a lot better. Like it's not top notch by any means, but it definitely looks a lot better than it did before, in my opinion.
Yeah, it definitely looks way better now. It's still not one of my favorite paladin sets. It just doesn't look very paladin-y to me somehow. Um, and I don't know if that might just be too much of a mix of like the geologic, like earthen sort of kind of crystal stuff that they've got going on with like the primal stuff, and then also like the dragony aspect with sort of more of a like scaled, layered with some spikes and the sort of dragon looking shoulders and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's like too much of a mix of too many different things, but it's okay. It's not bad. I did like a lot more of the cloth contrast in the concept art compared to the like duller armor look. And so maybe different color schemes will also make this look a bit better. I could definitely see a red version of this or a yellow looking way more
Appealing, yeah.
appealing to me. Yeah, I was trying to think of the word. Thank you. Um, so it might just be that the blue kind of faded look isn't really doing it for me, but
Yeah, we'll have to see. One thing I will say though that like as we transition to the next one then about the show, which is the priest tier set, I will say that I don't think every tier set needs to scream to you that relevant class. I think it's okay
I
if it's
agree with
just
that.
like another set that you have as an option as because if everything screamed paladin to you for the paladins, you would just be choosing between paladin sets as opposed to something unique, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the priest tier set, interesting.
It looks very similar to some past priest tier sets actually. I would agree with you though. I think it's like I'm fine with a paladin set that looks draconic and a paladin set that looks very like geologic, earthen, crystally. Like, and
Yeah.
we've had some of those before. So I that wasn't the point I was trying to make. It's more so the combination of like mixing the two together. I think wasn't necessarily working.
Yeah.
but but priest one overall, it has kind of a similar head piece to like I think it was the druid, and I don't know if that's intentional or not intentional. I feel like having a different look would maybe be better. It does end up being different because of the sort of faceplate thing and the like very bright white glow compared to the druid look. Other than that, it looks fine.
Yeah, what I will say is like just having looked through all these sets, and maybe this set in particular, is just this whole concept of portions. And I get that it's on a human, but you can be a human priest, right? And when I look at these shoulders, I'm like, dang, those are massive shoulders, right? And I look at the concept art, and the shoulders relative to everything else are like a very small aspect, yet still a very uh, eye grabbing portion of it, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at those shoulders and they're interested in me, but it's not like the cool part about them is that they're so big or something. And I see the current preset and it's just like, huh, that's where my eyes are drawn, but for a different reason entirely. But
Yeah, in the concept art to me, the like main defining factor is these sort of like scroll parchment
yeah,
like hanging pieces of paper or cloth or whatever. And I do wonder if maybe in movement this looks better with those because those are still present in this design or whatever, and
yeah,
maybe it just looks better in motion.
yep.
Um, but in a still picture, yeah, it doesn't really look like it fits the concept art as much as some of the others, and I do think the shoulders could maybe be smaller. And that's normally I like the big shoulder like sort of emphasized look that WoW has as an art style, but in this case it is a little bit too extreme for me.
Yep. I agree. And we can transition over to Rogue. Um, this definitely fits that primal, you know, very early concept tier set where it's just like I don't look at this and think Rogue. I do look at this and think, primal, draconic, like you said beforehand, right?
Mm. I think this is actually one of my favorite sets. I think the yellow is probably not the best color for it though. Like
Hmm.
I
Yep.
imagine this in like a red or a darker blue, not like the sort of white faded blue, but some of the darker like concept art ones that they've had. I think this would look sick. So this is actually one of my favorite sets. The red especially I think will look awesome. So
Yeah, no, on a different model as well, other than human, also could look really cool, in my opinion, as well. So, yeah, color could definitely fix this as well. Like we might be judging these off of LFR sets or something. That'd be pretty silly to do, right?
I mean, I also am not really of the opinion that like LFR should look bad and only Mythic should look cool. I'm like, how about they all look cool and then I have four cool options? That makes me a lot happier. Because I like to mix and match sets and use only a couple pieces from that set and mix them with the set from Firelands 8 years ago and this other piece from Warlords of Draenor and that type of thing. So
Yeah, fair
I'm
enough.
generally more of a fan of like they all should look cool, but and sometimes it's also like this tier especially looks like where they're trying to make the color um a cohesive thing for each like difficulty or whatever. And some
Yeah,
tiers they don't do that where they like LFR for hunter is pale green and LFR for rogue is a pale orange and LFR for druid is a pale purple. They just like let it be whatever and it's not a cohesive thing. So when they are doing it cohesively, it's like it works better for some classes and others and some like set designs than others. And so maybe allowing a bit more freedom in that where it's still yellow but maybe it's like a different saturation of yellow is better, but I don't know. Overall it works okay. And I do like that when like you're all in like the mythic gear that like you all look like a complete team of like everybody's super red and it looks
yeah, that's true.
cool together. So I do understand why they do it and it does look cool. So I give them a pass.
Yeah, we definitely don't have a lot of memers in our group or anything that just use the worst transmogs it can find, but yes, I know, I agree with you. um, the shaman tier set, I think that this has the potential to be cool. I'm not the biggest fan of the current color scheme. I would really love to see it in some other ones. Like if we could get a green or a blue for Resto, in my opinion, that would be really cool. We'll obviously have to see how it comes out, but like you said, this is very like the primal concept. Like it's cool. In that regard, I very much want to see like how it plays out. I don't know. What do you think about it?
I just realized this is on Orc too.
It
Um,
is, yeah.
because like the shoulders are gigantic.
Hmm.
But that does kind of fit the shaman look, and especially with the earth, like, I mean, you're basically wearing like mountains on your shoulders, kind of. And overall, I like the look of it. It's very shamany, but it is also similar to some stuff that's been shaman sets in the past. But like, it's always good to get updated new stuff that's in a similar look, I think. So
I
I like
will
it.
say that, with the concept of the raid being this primal concept a little bit, right? That's going to fit the shaman the most out of all
Very
your
true.
classes. So it did feel like, as much as this is a shaman set, that's because of the raid itself.
Right.
So, and I will say the
All the sets
concept,
look vaguely shamany. Yeah, I know what
yeah,
you mean.
and the concept art felt like it had a bit more of like a lightning focus, whereas the actual set had more earth. Both fit shaman, so let's just kind of see how it comes out in different
Maybe
colors.
I'm being optimistic here. Maybe that changes with difficulty and color variation. That a blue one might look more lightningy, and this one is like the earthy, like rock
Oh, here he goes,
look.
getting my hopes up again. But
Yeah,
we
I'm
can
sorry. Okay.
we can go over to look at Warlock now. Um, you know, what I will say is that this won't have the same controversy that the last one had, so it's already winning in that regard.
True. Yeah, this one's fine. Warlock is like my least played class overall of like all of WoW history or whatever. I've just never really felt any association with Warlock or any appeal really. Um, it's fine. It looks like a Warlock to me, but I'm never really like super impressed or like jealous of Warlocks. I guess it the aesthetic just doesn't really like speak to me. So
Yeah, it's what's really interesting though is if you take a quick look, like the shoulders took on this very like Drake kind of look, like the upper half of the head of a dragon or something like that, right? And if you look at the concept art, that was actually placed more in the like robe portion of it, where those
I
like
see what you mean.
actual things showed up. So it's interesting that they took the concept art and just kind of ran with it a bit more. The concept art is almost naturally always going to look better than the actual in-game set, and like how they handle the horns and all that versus like what is lit up on the face. I get the concept that you need to see, or feel a bit more of your character inside that armor and everything, but yeah, I feel like there might be more that could have been done here, but like you said, I'm not a warlock. I can't complain necessarily.
I think this one also will look way better in red.
Yeah, that's true. Um, all right, then the warrior set a rock.
Yep,
Yes,
it's Pet Rocky.
yes. So the concept art was a rock. The realistic version was a rock. I will say the concept art made me think more of a shaman, or I'm sorry,
It
the
did look very
current
shamany.
shaman set. Yeah. So it's interesting to see how they like try to differentiate between the two. Um, this has potential with different color schemes to look really cool. I'll leave it at that. But
Yeah,
our
there's been a few sets that look like this from Warrior already in the past, and yeah, it's like
yeah,
there's not much to say. It's like, yep, that looks like a rock.
our warrior raiders already taken this meme a bit too far, renaming
Yes.
themselves Rock and Rock 2 with images of a rock. Not necessarily, not like Dwayne the Rock Johnson or something, but like literally a rock. So I don't know. We will see. I like the concept. Um, it'll be cool to look into the raid when more of that comes out. Kind of see how closely that ties into this whole aesthetic and everything. But yeah, I don't know. I like the these tier sets overall get a general thumbs up from me. Um, I think the color scheme is incredibly important, so I'll
Yeah.
be looking for that before I make any final judgments. But
Yeah, I would say right now they're like above average, but not like some of my favorite sets probably on anybody that I've seen. I
yes,
would
yes,
probably rate them like overall as a group something like 8 out of 10 or something. I mean, it's hard to judge Evoker because like they haven't had any sets in the
yeah,
past, but like the Evoker set is probably my favorite of them all. But like I don't
that's
know,
true.
it is also hard to compare. And I do wonder how much that will show on your dragon form, if at all, because I feel like it would be kind of lame if you can't see it at all in your dragon form. But then also like Boomkin exists and like Guardian Druid and stuff exists, so they do that sometimes. Um, but yeah, it's probably my favorite of them all. So
If I'm well, quick point about the tier sets in general. I definitely don't think they have to try to outdo themselves every time. I definitely feel like they can do this where they take it a different
if we're
direction.
getting like an 8 out of 10 every time with like an occasional like 9 or 10 out of 10 tier set, like that's more than fine with me. That's pretty good. So yeah.
Yeah. And then what I will say though, from what I've seen the customization is I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty certain that when you are doing the customization of your Dracthyr, you can pick the armor options that it shows.
Yes.
Um so but not like from your current set. I mean literally like some default sets, and I don't know if they'll take that
Yes.
back,
Well, there
but
is also armor that like when you get like an item upgrade in the world or whatever, that replaces or shows on top of the armor that you chose in the character customization.
interesting.
So
Okay.
you can get ones that don't match and that look weird. Uh and I don't know if they'll have a whole bunch of like unique models and stuff like that or how that will work, but uh yet to be seen, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, it'll be fun to see whenever open beta comes, or if you and I are lucky enough to receive beforehand. And what I will say is there are a lot of interviews that are happening more recently, and I know that's like to build up hype for the game. And I think what we've heard, or at least I've seen on individual streams, like for both Scripe and for Max, they are going to be having some interviews closer to the raid to build up
Mhm.
hype for that. I think that is a great concept. It might suck for what they originally intended for it. Like I think Max specifically said he was like, "Dang, I don't want to ask questions that weren't necessarily all raid related, but I get why they're doing it."
Right. I do also think a lot of the questions he's going to ask will probably get asked or answered regardless before that. And I feel like once the raid comes, he's going to want to be asking about the raid anyway. So I think he's maybe uh, forgetting his own passion, I guess, for raiding and stuff like that. Because once raid becomes the focus, he is all about the raid for sure. So
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see how all of season 4 plays out and all that, but I just hope that they keep the kind of interview going. I think that's probably like the most insightful portion that we get to hear from the devs. Largely one of the very few portions we get to hear from them, but it's a cool concept to see like it's not even just the big names that are receiving these interviews. Like you can see some smaller groups that don't necessarily have all the views. Like they're taking it to them, and that helps them grow as well.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a good, just a more healthy like method of communication for both sides, like the community and of players and like Blizzard themselves, to have the communication be a more open, constant communication or regular communication uh on both sides. And yeah, I think I've enjoyed the communication they've done so far of like talking about the talent trees and like the issues that people have brought up and saying, "Yep, we're going to make a change there. Yep, we're changing that." I think that's been awesome. I hope that stays as a regular thing. Like I said, I hope it sets a new standard. Um yeah,
Yeah, who
thumbs up.
knows? Maybe that extends to us. And don't worry, I would keep Angry Rio in a cage to avoid certain
I
questions
would
from being asked.
I I would be reasonable.
Oh, you say that now. But Thanks for listening, and I'm sure we will have a lot more to chat about next week following this set of alpha releases.
We'll, of course, hopefully have the shaman talent tree to talk about, right?
Oh, absolutely. That is my goal.